This tutorial will demonstrate loading and plotting of core section measurement data in Corelyzer. Two types of data files can be imported into Corelyzer: Corelyzer's own XML-based data format and text-based tabular data, typically comma-separated values files or CSV files that are saved in Excel. If you already have a Corelyzer formatted XML file, you can import it without further effort. You do that just to demonstrate briefly by going to File, Load Data, Open XML Data Files. You'd select that data file or files, and those would immediately appear in the Data Files column here. You could then open the graphing dialog and plot those. But again, that is not typically how people's data is already represented. In most cases, projects have data in Excel or another spreadsheet format that must first be converted to the Corelyzer XML format. And this tutorial will focus on that workflow. To get started, you'll need some measurement data. It should contain a header row, a units row, although this is optional, but we highly recommend it, and one or more data rows. Each data row should include a section ID, a depth, and one or more measurements from that section at that depth. To plot data in Corelyzer, the section IDs in your data must exactly match the corresponding section name in Corelyzer. That's really important to remember. The names have to match exactly or there will be problems. At the CSD facility, we use comma-separated values files for import into Corelyzer, and we recommend you do the same. Other formats, like tab-separated values or space-separated values, can be used, but it complicates the import process. So I've prepared a simple Corelyzer session here. Consists of one track and 3 sections. And I have a corresponding measurement data file in Excel. So just to cover the requirements, so we have a header row, we have a units row, and then we have many measurement data rows from many sections. Well, in this case, only 3 sections, but a typical project would have hundreds of sections of measurement data, if not more. Note that if your project does not have a units row, if you choose not to include a units row, Corelyzer will assume that whatever column you choose as the depth column, it will assume those values are in meters. So that's the main caveat with excluding a units row. So again, we recommend just including one, and then you can do meters or centimeters, and Corelyzer will interpret that appropriately. So we have a header row, we have a units row, and then we have our data rows, and each data row consists of a section ID, a depth. I actually have 2 here for purposes of this demonstration, but you'll only choose one at import time, either section depth or accumulated depth. And then 1 or more measurement data rows. In this case, we just have 2. I chose gamma density and MS loop measurements. So that's my data file. Again, Corelyzer cannot import an Excel file directly, so we need to save this as a text-based file. And again, the typical format is CSV. So I'm going to go down here and choose CSV, save this file. Now I'll return to Corelyzer and import this file. I'll go to File, Load Data, and I'll choose Convert Tabular Data to XML. Navigate to my 3 sections file here, choose Open, and then I'll see the Convert Tabular Data dialog. So because we saved as a CSV file, the default delimiter in this dialog is a comma. So basically everything you see in the grid here should correspond exactly to what you see in Excel if things worked correctly. If I had saved as a tab-separated file or a space-separated file, things here probably would not look correct. Typically, like, all the values would be mashed into a single column, or there would be a bunch of blank cells. In that case, you would want to change your delimiter to be tab to match a tab delimited file or space. And at that point, this grid will update, and you should see something more like what you see here. It should look like your data does in Excel, and that would indicate you're using the correct delimiter. But you can avoid all that by just saving as CSV from Excel and using the default comma here. So anyway, this all looks good. And now for Corelyzer to convert our data to its own format so we can plot data, we need to tell it a few things about our data. First of all, we need to tell it where our data rows begin and where they end. And so the first row of our data is row 3. And our data runs all the way down to row 435. Corelyzer will just default to the last row in the file. We want to import all of that. Of course, you could just import a subset of these rows if you wanted to. You could import from row 100 to 200 or something, but typically you'll just import it all. Next, it needs to know where the fields or header row is. That's row 1 in our file. Let's expand these a bit. Next, it wants to know where the units row is. In our case, the units row is row 2. If you don't have a units row, you can uncheck this box and ignore this field. Again, just remember that whatever depth column you choose as your depth, those values will be interpreted as meters always if you do not provide a units row. But we have one, so we'll leave it there. Next, you need to indicate what column should be used as depth. And so you have a choice here of 2 different depth modes. You can either do section depth or accumulated depth. We have columns for both of these in this demonstration file. So section depth is a section relative depth. The top of each section is depth 0. So as you can see in my section depth column here, this is the first measurement in this core, and it will increase as we go downward. And once we get to a new core, so now that's the last measurement in 2H2, now we're on a new core, 3H1, and as you can see, the section depth resets. It starts back at 1 centimeter. And the same will apply for, there's the last measurement of 3H1, and now we're in 3H2. So once again, we've started over from 1. And so that is section depth. So in this case, if we wanted to use section depth to import our data, we would set our depth column as 2 and leave our depth mode at section depth. On the other hand, if you have accumulated depth, so in this case we're starting from 1 at the top of the first core, but when we get to the transition to the next core, so we're going from 2H2 to 3H1 here, we don't reset, we just keep counting upwards. So this one will start from 140. And then once we get to 3H2 here, again, we don't reset the count, we just continue. So this is accumulated depth. And so if our depth was in that format, we would specify column 3, and we would make sure to choose accumulated depth here. So Corelyzer can handle either of those forms of depth. At the CSD facility, we almost always work in section depth. But you can do accumulated depth if that's how your data is already formatted. And then finally, we need to tell Corelyzer what column contains our section's names, which again need to correspond exactly to the names of the sections in Corelyzer in order to plot data. So in our case, that is clearly section 1, or sorry, column 1, excuse me. And so we've indicated that here with column 1. And you see that in the section name preview over here. Like if I put 2 in here, now it's actually pulling the section depth here. That's clearly not correct. So if you see something that does not look like a section name in the section name preview box, that usually means you have the wrong column indicated here. So if I change back to 1, that looks like a section name. If you had bogus values, like 9999 or something that you want to ignore, you could put that in here. We generally recommend cleaning such values in Excel before importing into Corelyzer. So those are our import parameters. They all look good. So I want to proceed. I will click the next button. And now, this is much simpler. All we have to do is choose the columns that we want to import, the measurement data we want to import. So in our case, we just want to import gamma density and MS loop, our 2 measurement data columns. So I'm happy with that. I'm going to click finish. And now Corelyzer is going to prompt me to save a file. So this is going to be it's going to convert our data to the Corelyzer XML format. And so it's asking us right now where we want to save that XML data file. I'm just going to save it on my desktop. Call glad for data. Actually, don't need to include the XML. Corelyzer will add that automatically. So if I hit save, there we go. So the dialog has gone away, and now you'll notice that our data file that we just provided the name of, glad4data XML, is in this list. And you can see our 2 data types that we chose are in this fields column here. So we've imported and converted our data to the correct format. We can see our data file in the data files list. So now let's plot this data. To do that, you can either right-click on the data file here and choose Graph, or you can right-click on any section in the visualization canvas and choose the Graph option in that menu. So we'll choose that, and that will open the Graph Settings dialog. So your project could have multiple data files. Ours only has one right now. There would be multiple choices here, one for each data file I had loaded into my project if I had more than one. The section below shows the sections for which this file contains data. And then below that, you can see the fields available for plotting and various options. So we'll start as simply as possible here and just plot data on a single section, this 2H2 section. And so to plot data is really easy. All you do is check the show box, or the show checkbox here, and there we go. Look, we've got our gamma density, and if you check MS loop as well, it just plots right on top of the gamma density data. The data range showed here is just the range of data for the currently selected section. You can change the color of a plot by clicking the rectangle here, so I could change this to be a brighter green. I could change this to be a red. You can select other properties of the graph, like I could make my gamma density be a point plot, and I could make my MS loop be a line and points plot. You can adjust the scale of the graph here. So for example, I could make this run from 100 to 600. If I click apply, you can see that changed sort of the bounds. It squished the plot a little bit. You could exclude certain values if you want to. If I wanted to exclude all values less than 200 here, and you can see a few of the values on the left there went away. I could also exclude all values over 350 or something. This should get rid of many of them. So you have various options to control how you plot your data. You can also collapse all your graphs into a single pair of axes. You can also, once you're in that mode, you can overlay your plots on images. So there are a variety of options there. So I'm going to unplot these. So in smaller projects, it probably works to just to do these one at a time. But in a larger project with tens or hundreds or even thousands of core sections, it's easier to just plot everything at once. And so to do that, you can multiple select in the sections available in this data file. So you could either do that by using multiple select options, or you can just click select all, and then check the boxes in the same way, and it will just plot for all of those. And now any changes we make to the properties will affect all of our plots of these. So if I change these to points, all my MS loop will now plot as points. Now all of my gamma density, will plot as cross points, for instance. So that's typically an easier way is to select everything and just plot it all. Even if you have sections in your data for which there is no corresponding section in Corelyzer, it will work just fine. So that is the typical workflow at the CSD facility, and is the best way to do this for any project that has lots and lots of sections, unless you only want to plot on a specific section. One more trick that people often find helpful, because it's a little bit buried in the interface. If you wanted to increase the size of these graphs, you can do that by using the square bracket keys on your keyboard. So if I do the right square bracket, or sort of a closing square bracket, you can see it expands the range of these, and left square bracket, so opening bracket, will reduce their size. So often if you're zoomed way out, it's impossible to sort of see what's going on in the graphs, and so it really helps to expand the scale using the bracket keys. As always, remember that whatever changes you make to the plotting and plot properties, visual properties, whether it's dot or line or whatever. Any changes you make will need to be saved in your session. Otherwise, the next time if you close and reopen, those changes will be lost. So if we save our session here and now close and reopen, all of those plots and the styles we chose for them will be retained and restored when you reopen that section. I'd like to briefly demonstrate what happens if section names in your data don't exactly match the section names in Corelyzer, just to demonstrate this because it is a fairly common occurrence. So right now, this file is all correct. All my names match up. I'm going to intentionally make this wrong. I'm going to change this to be 2x. And for all of the rows of this section, I'm going to make that incorrect. So now for this section, these are not going to match. So I'm going to save this as a separate file. Let's say this is mismatch.csv. And now we'll quickly import this into Corelyzer. Here's my mismatch file. Okay, so this is all fine. I'm just going to use section depth. Everything looks good here. I'm going to import gamma density and MS loop. And I'm going to save this on my desktop as glad for data mismatch. Okay, so now you can see I've added a second data file, this mismatch data file, to my data files. I'm going to open the graph dialog. It doesn't matter which of these I click. I can always change the file. So yeah, as you see now I have two data files. So if I go to glad data, the original one with the correct section names, everything looks good. But when I change to my data mismatch file, you'll see some scary text in red. This file contains data for 3 sections. However, there is no corresponding image found for one of those sections. And that section is drawn in red here to further indicate that this is the problem section. Like, Corelyzer cannot find a section whose name ends in 2x. The other two look good, so we can still plot those as normal. So you can see we just plotted those, it's no problem. But if we try to plot this one, we still have the options to do so, but nothing is going to happen because Corelyzer has no idea what core to try and plot that data onto. So when this happens, what you need to do is the following. You should delete that data file from your project. It's just going to remove it from the project. It's not going to delete the file itself. Return to Excel and correct the mismatch. I'm just going to undo. It's the easiest way to do that and save it. And then I save this as sections mismatch.csv and re-import that file. Oops. Re-import. This should all be good. Get gamma and MS loop again. Oops, come on. Finish. We'll save this as the same file as before. Okay, so now it's back in our project. So now if we choose to graph, now you can see that we don't have any scary red text because all 3 of our sections correspond to a section in Corelyzer. So now we can plot on all 3 and all is well. So typically when you see that red text, that's what it means. You have some kind of mismatch between your data section names and the Corelyzer section names. I should point out that there are cases, certain workflows where this might not be a problem. And you should not be as scared of the red text. Often at the CSD facility, we typically scan all of the cores in a project before any of those cores are split and imaged, and then those images are one by one imported into Corelyzer. So basically there will be cases where you can import the entire data file into Corelyzer. So you know our data file could have hundreds of cores worth of data, but because you've only imported the first 10 images as sections in Corelyzer, this dialog will say, I'm missing all these sections. I don't have a bunch of matches. And that is not a problem. So just to briefly demonstrate that, since I'm not explaining it very well, let's just delete one section from this project right now, 3H2. And now if we go back to the graphing dialog, we're going to see the scary red text because our data contains measurements for 3H2, but our project does not contain it. And that's just because, possibly because of your workflow, that section may just not have been added as a section image yet. So there's a case where the red text should be less worrisome depending on your workflow, but typically you're expecting that the data you're importing, you have a corresponding section in Corelyzer for all of those data sections. So anyway, just something to be aware of, that there are cases where seeing these errors is not necessarily problematic. It just means that you haven't pulled that section image into Corelyzer yet, but eventually it will be there, assuming you want to add all of those sections to your Corelyzer project. And those are the basics of importing and plotting data in Corelyzer.